Sound sync. Check, 1, 2. Hi, and welcome back to this next episode. Excuse the setup here. I got some new camera gear. I have an anamorphic lens I'm shooting this on with some camera I'm testing for Tested. And it's been a couple months since that last update. The COVID stuff is still kind of happening. We're not going out as much. We're slowly getting back into the world, but I'm still doing a lot of the writing just straight from home, still working straight from home, still staying at home quite a bit. But this update's kind of a big milestone for me. That last episode you saw, if I can remember right, I was kind of just getting ready for the writing process. I had the outline all set up, had like a few outlines, a few different outlines that were formatted differently, that were asking me different questions to think about the script, and using the Save the Cat, using just basic outline structure, story stuff. And I just basically took that as an amalgamation of what those answers to those questions were speaking to me, if that makes sense. The questions that I was answering surprised myself, and so I had to kind of rewrite those into the outline, into my main base outline, which I finished and then started writing. I think I did two things. Since you last saw, I was just getting ready to write, and what I did was I took the opportunity to actually just handwrite a draft. I wanted to avoid doing a vomit draft. In the past, I've done vomit drafts where I just sat at the computer and I just wrote the screenplay, and I got to like the 90 to 120 pages, and it was a script based off the outline. I wanted to avoid that. I wanted to even avoid touching the computer until I kind of had a vomit draft that was handwritten, so that I knew of its temporal existence. I didn't want to rewrite a vomit draft to become a script. Every time I've done that in the past, I feel like I've put myself in some hard quarters. I don't know how other writers do that, but like I had this vomit draft, and then subconsciously I wanted to stick to a lot of those scenes, those beats, and if I did kind of force myself to figure out, oh, this wasn't the best route, this wasn't the best call, it would just take me a lot longer to pull scenes and rewrite things, and then I would start to lose focus, and I'd start to lose kind of what the tone of the story is, and that's where my most, I guess, kind of sloppy screenplays happened, is when I took that vomit draft and I just went crazy in rewriting. So to avoid doing that, I basically took that outline and I just grabbed my iPad. I use a handwriting app called like Good Notes, I think. I mean, people can do this on paper and pen. I'm not analog or digital one way or the other on this stance, but I really like this app because it has like notebooks, and so that are set in like tab form. So I would have my outline next to me, and I would start writing scenes, start going. And if kind of I was stuck a little bit, I'll just jump over to another notebook, and I'll maybe just write a little bit about the character. Like for example, I think I got to a character in this where I was like, I started to write him, and I'll explain exactly what I do write, because I don't write lines of dialogue, but I started to write him, and then I realized I don't really know him, and so I jumped over to another notebook, and I started to really like short story it, start to figure out little like, oh, what did this guy do in his past? How did he get here? And so I kind of wrote this little backstory of him, maybe the year prior to these events, and that gave me a sense of who he was, gave me a sense of his voice. And so I did that with a bunch of my characters as I was writing this vomit draft. I would start to write a couple lines of dialogue, figure I don't really know them yet, because you can't really know them in the outline. In the outline, they're just people that serve the function of the plot. And you have ideas of where you want to go with the characters, but you really need the characters to speak up and speak to you to some regard. And so I did that for a lot of these characters, and the vomit draft really, I printed it all up here, but it's just a bunch of pages of just like the in red I would do exterior, interior, and scene. And so I would think about the scene, what's happening there, refer to my notes, and I would kind of maybe like do one line of scene description, anything that's important. I know I'm going to flavor and fluff this up in the actual script, so just if there was something in there that I need to remember, I don't want to forget, I'll write it in there, and then I'll just write like the conflict, like why does this scene exist? And so I'll write one line about that, and then I'll kind of just play it in my head, and lines of dialogue I know I liked, or that lead to one thing, I'll just write a couple lines, like, Lorenzo says this, Lorenzo, blah, 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 Donatello, blah, 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 and then just move on. Like I wasn't trying to finish or cap conversations or make them rounded, as long as I gave myself enough information to that when I sat down, I would understand what I was trying to say. So I wrote this whole thing. I mean, here's the script. It's about 50 52 pages of just handwritten story of this screenplay. And that was a pretty big, I should have done a check in there, but I just wanted to keep going. I had great momentum. And so I took that, printed it up as you see here, and since then I've been sitting down at the computer and just writing it, going page by page. It averages out about 2 typed pages per handwritten page. So I'm guessing the script's gonna be about 100 pages. I knocked out 20 pages of typing the script up in about 2 days, which felt great. It was just like, okay, it was like pulling the Band-Aid off. Now you're writing this thing. Now you're actually writing the draft that this video series kind of leading up to, the first draft. You are writing it, and now that momentum is going, and that felt great. And having this handwritten version, having those outlines to refer to, were like, they were just tools to kind of push me if ever I got stuck. You know, people talk about writer's block a lot, and I think everybody's interpretation of what that is different. Mine usually resulted in just like, I wasn't clear on where I wanted to go, and it would kind of cripple me into just not doing anything. And so all of these things are just to get me over that hump. And so there are a few moments where I'm typing and I was like, oh, that scene doesn't really work. And I'll take a moment to think, I'll look through my notes, and then, I think I maybe have 1 or 2 scenes where I just kind of gave myself a little asterisk, like, come back to this, and just wrote it really terribly. I knew I wasn't feeling it, but I just needed to get through that scene to get to the next. Because if I stuck myself on that scene, it would take me days to like figure it out. And I'll have a much easier time figuring it out once I get to the end, and I can come back to those asterisk scenes and then rewrite those. So that's kind of, I think I used this technique on the last couple of my screenplays that I wrote, and it's what pushes me, what gets me going fastest. I've tried every other technique of like outlining, writing, like I said, the vomit draft, coming back and rewriting. I know like most screenplays that are great are rewritten. You know, this first draft is always kind of terrible, even though this is a big celebration. Going to the first draft in the series, it is something to celebrate because it is a huge thing. But like, you're gonna get every screenplay that you see, every movie you've seen is obviously like not hundreds, maybe dozens of rewritten, dozens of times rewritten to get there. At page 50. I got to the point where all the characters have been introduced, the timeline has kind of been established, the situation is all kind of unfolded, and now we're at the point where the David is moving, about page 50. So almost about an hour into the movie, the David starts to move, starts to do his journey, which I kind of had in my mind to begin with. I thought it wasn't going to be a full movie about just all 4 days and that's it. The characters really need to populate this, and we really need to bring this story to life. Because a story just about a statue moving down the street is nothing on its own, and just throwing characters in there. Well, it could be done. I'm sure there's a version of this that is your Mad Max, Fury Road. Just hit the ground running and go. But that wasn't the story that I wanted to tell, and so I wanted to focus on these different peoples, these peripheral characters in the world of the Renaissance, where we usually only just see the heavy hitters, the Michelangelos, the Leonardos. And I wanted to focus on these guys in the street. So as the David started moving, I started writing, and I realized I want one last little tool to help me get through that. And so what I did was I printed up a map of Florence on Google Maps, and I used Procreate on my iPad, and I kind of sketched out the pathway of where he's going to go, the street names, so that I can use those as scenes. So like I know, okay, when they're at the Via dei Magazzini, they are at day 3, and on the right here I have like the days. This is how many days it took, 4 days, and this is like where they're at in these days. And then in blue I have like the conflict that's happening there, or like the big event that's happening there. It's going to take place. And so I did this, and then this is silly. I 3D printed a little David statue, and so every day that I'm writing, as I move through the screenplay, I'm kind of moving him. It's like a little progress bar, right? And it's like a visual indicator for me to a visual motivator for me to keep going, seeing how far the David's going down. And so by the time the David's down at the end here, I'll be in the last few scenes, the last few pages of the script, and I can kind of close this thing out. But this is good. I know the COVID stuff really kind of knocked me around a bit mentally, just foggy, and I did take little breaks here and there to make some short films, just because I needed to exercise myself creatively. I mean, I'm a visual, creative storyteller to begin with, and so this is kind of, like I said, I'm not a working writer. This is what I do for fun or to exercise a different part of my brain. But like, when I'm kind of really feeling the need to be creative, but I'm in a funk, I rely on visual storytelling, and that's where those short films really help. So again, a lot of life events that kind of slowed this thing down. We're probably about 6 months in, which is a little bit longer than I wanted to take, but that's okay. And the world kind of rocked radically, and I was able to create other creative outlets in the form of short films and whatever little edits I was doing to just kind of get me refreshed and re-energized, so that when I came back to this and started writing the handwriting part, I would really knocked it out, and that felt great. It felt really great. So there we go. The next update I will do will hopefully be soon, as I near the end of this draft, and give you one more update about some more thoughts about what goes on in my head as I get towards the finishing line of writing a screenplay. So thank you guys for watching this. I will see you on the next episode. Bye.